Ever get stuck, trying to make something perfect, like
Yeah.
really perfect,
Mm-hmm.
only to realize you spent way too much time
Yeah.
and it's still not even done.
Right.
Turns out there's a whole philosophy around this in the business world,
Oh, yeah.
and it's especially relevant, I think, to the fast-paced world of hospitality.
Absolutely.
Get ready to dive into when best is the enemy of good enough.
I love it.
So we're unpacking an opinion piece from hospitality expert Terrence Ronson,
Okay.
published on Hospitality Net,
All right.
which really challenges the industry's traditional obsession with exceeding expectations at any cost.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one.
Yeah,
The hospitality industry is known for, going above and beyond.
right.
But this article really argues that in today's landscape,
Yeah.
with all this increasing competition and rising costs,
Hmm.
that approach may not always be the most sustainable
I see.
or even the most effective strategy.
So instead of, bending over backwards for every single guest request,
Yeah.
are we talking about hotels cutting corners now?
No, no, no.
Okay.
It's not about that.
Okay.
It's not about cutting corners, but
Okay.
rather about operational efficiency.
Okay.
So,
Hmm.
instead of offering a rarely used bespoke service, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a hotel focuses on significantly improving commonly used amenities,
Okay.
like their Wi-Fi or the
Mhm.
gym facilities.
Yeah, things that everyone uses.
Exactly, things that have a wider impact
Yeah.
on guest satisfaction.
Okay.
So it's about data-driven decision making,
I see.
understanding what truly enhances the guest experience,
Right.
and then focusing resources on those areas.
So it's less about lowering standards and more about strategically choosing where to set the bar.
Exactly.
Okay. I can see how that makes sense from a business perspective.
Mhm.
But how are hotels measuring whether this actually leads to improved guest satisfaction?
That's a great question.
Right.
Hotels are leveraging data analytics more than ever before. They're tracking things like guest reviews, social media sentiment,
Mm-hmm.
and even operational data
To see what's working.
to see what's resonating
Yeah.
and what's not.
Right.
So, for example,
Yeah.
if data reveals that guests consistently complain about slow check-in processes,
Right.
a hotel might invest in automated kiosks or mobile check-in options
Right.
to streamline that whole experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's about using data to pinpoint areas for improvement
Yeah.
and then finding efficient solutions
Right.
that don't necessarily mean sacrificing quality.
That's interesting. So it sounds like technology plays a big role in this shift toward a good enough approach.
Huge role.
But how do they ensure that the technology itself doesn't become a source of frustration for guests?
Oh, that's crucial.
Right.
It's not just about implementing technology for technology's sake.
Right.
Hotels need to ensure that any technology they adopt is user-friendly,
Easy to use.
intuitive,
Yeah.
and actually enhances the guest experience. Think about it. Those self-service kiosks at airports,
Uh-huh.
they're a great example of technology done right.
I see what you mean.
They're efficient,
Yeah.
they're easy to use,
Mm-hmm.
and most travelers actually prefer them to waiting in a long line.
I see what you mean. Yeah. When it works seamlessly, technology can actually feel more personal and less like a hassle.
For sure.
But what about those guests who still crave that human touch?
Right?
Is there a risk of alienating those who prefer a more traditional hospitality experience?
Well, there's always going to be a segment of guests who value that personal interaction.
Right.
And that's where the good enough philosophy gets really interesting.
Okay.
It's not about replacing human interaction entirely,
Right.
but rather about strategically augmenting it.
Okay.
So hotels are now using AI-powered chatbots
Right.
to handle routine guest requests.
All right. So like extra towels or...
Like extra towels, room service orders.
Okay. So that frees up staff to focus on providing that personal touch where it truly matters.
Exactly.
I've had mixed experiences with those chatbots, though.
Oh, yeah.
Some are great,
Uh-huh.
but others can be incredibly frustrating
Yeah, for sure.
to deal with. How can hotels ensure that their chatbots are actually helpful and not just adding another layer of complexity for guests?
Well, the key is to design chatbots that are intelligent, intuitive,
Yeah.
and capable of handling a wide range of requests accurately.
Okay. So it seems like it really comes down to, finding the right balance,
Yeah.
using technology to streamline the basics,
Uh-huh.
and then having, human staff available to provide that personalized touch when needed.
Exactly.
It makes sense in theory.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, are there specific examples of hotels that are really nailing this good enough approach?
Oh, yeah.
in a way that actually elevates the guest experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One example that comes to mind is this boutique hotel chain
Okay.
that completely reimagined their breakfast service.
All right.
They realized that their elaborate buffet, while impressive,
Yeah.
was leading to a lot of food waste
Yeah.
and wasn't necessarily what their guests valued most.
Right.
So instead, they switched to a simplified a la carte menu
Okay.
featuring locally sourced,
Oh, nice.
high-quality ingredients.
Okay.
And guests loved the fresh, made-to-order options.
Yeah.
And the hotel was able to reduce food waste and costs.
Wow. So it was really a win-win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example of how good enough doesn't mean sacrificing quality.
Right.
It's about focusing on what truly matters to your guests.
I love that example. It's not about cutting corners. It's about being thoughtful and intentional about where you invest your resources.
For sure.
I'm guessing this approach also forces hotels to get really clear on who their target market is
Absolutely.
and what those guests actually want.
Yeah, take, for instance, a budget-friendly hostel.
Okay.
They might decide to forego fancy amenities
Okay.
and instead focus on creating a social atmosphere with, communal spaces and organized activities.
Makes sense.
So their good enough might look very different from a luxury resort
Right.
where, personalized service and
Yeah.
exclusive experiences are paramount.
Right. They're catering to a very different clientele.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The key is understanding your unique value proposition
Right.
and aligning your operations with that.
It strikes me that this whole conversation really challenges the traditional notion of luxury in the hospitality industry.
I think so too.
It used to be all about opulence and extravagance,
Yeah.
but maybe true luxury is now about something different.
Uh-huh.
Could it be about efficiency,
Hmm.
personalization,
Yeah.
and a more sustainable approach?
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
I think there's a growing segment of travelers
Okay.
who are looking for a more mindful and responsible form of luxury.
Interesting.
They care about sustainability, they value authenticity,
Okay.
and they're willing to pay a premium for experiences that align with their values.
So maybe those travelers aren't impressed by a hotel that offers a million different amenities they'll never use.
Right.
Maybe they're more drawn to a hotel that focuses on doing a few things exceptionally well.
Yeah.
A hotel that's transparent about its sustainability practices and that prioritizes creating a genuine connection with its guests.
I think you're spot on.
Yeah.
There's a real opportunity for hotels to differentiate themselves by embracing this more conscious approach to hospitality.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that guests are increasingly demanding.
But let's be realistic.
Sure.
There must be some downsides
Oh, yeah.
or challenges to adopting this good enough philosophy,
Oh,
right?
of course.
What are some of the potential pitfalls that hotels need to be aware of?
Well, you're right. It's not without its challenges.
Yeah.
One of the biggest risks is misinterpreting good enough as an excuse for complacency or mediocrity.
Right.
If a hotel isn't careful, they
Yeah.
could end up lowering their standards across the board. Oh, I see.
Which would ultimately lead to a decline in guest satisfaction.
So how do they avoid that slippery slope?
Right.
How do they ensure that good enough doesn't become synonymous with just getting by?
It all comes down to setting clear standards and metrics
Okay.
for what good enough looks like in each area of the hotel's operation.
So really defining it
Defining it.
clearly
Exactly.
for each specific area.
Yeah. And they need to constantly monitor guest feedback
Okay.
and industry trends
We're stay ahead of the curve.
to ensure they're staying relevant and meeting evolving expectations.
So it's not about simply doing less.
Right.
It's about doing things differently
Yeah.
and doing them well.
And doing them well.
Another challenge I could foresee is managing guest perception.
So for sure.
Some people might feel like they're being shortchanged if they perceive a hotel as cutting corners
Yeah.
or not going the extra mile.
Right.
How do hotels address that potential disconnect?
Transparency is key.
Okay.
Hotels need to be upfront about their approach.
And clearly articulate the value proposition they're offering.
Okay.
So instead of trying to hide the fact that they've simplified their room service menu, for example,
Right.
they could emphasize that this allows them to offer more competitive room rates
I see.
or invest in other amenities that guests value more highly.
Okay.
It's all about framing the narrative
Right.
in a way that resonates with guests and highlights the benefits of this good enough approach.
I like that. Reframing it as a conscious choice, not a compromise.
Exactly.
So instead of viewing it as a hotel doing less,
Yeah,
guests can see it as the hotel prioritizing the things that matter most.
exactly.
It's almost like a shift in the whole definition of luxury,
Yeah,
moving away from excess and toward intentionality.
I agree.
It's fascinating to consider the ripple effects this shift in thinking could have on the entire hospitality industry.
Absolutely. It really challenges us to rethink what we value and prioritize,
Yeah,
both as consumers and as businesses.
this conversation has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's not just about hotels and restaurants.
Right.
It's about finding that balance in all aspects of life.
Mm-hmm.
Are there areas where we're striving for perfection when excellence would suffice?
Mm-hmm.
Are we letting the pursuit of best prevent us from achieving good enough in a way that actually makes us happier and more fulfilled?
I think that's a question we could all benefit from asking ourselves.
It's interesting to consider how this good enough philosophy might impact the future of the hospitality industry. Do you think this trend will continue to gain momentum, or is it just a passing fad?
I think it's more than just a trend. It aligns with, several larger shifts that we're seeing, not just in hospitality, but across various industries.
Yeah,
For one thing, there's a growing awareness of the need for sustainability.
right.
And the good enough approach allows businesses to optimize resources,
Hmm.
reduce waste, and operate more responsibly.
So it's not just about saving money, it's also about aligning with a more eco-conscious mindset, which makes a lot of sense, especially considering how much waste the hospitality industry generates.
Right.
From food to linens to energy consumption.
It's huge.
Just a lot.
Yeah, and I think consumers are increasingly attuned to this as well.
Yeah.
People want to support businesses that are making those conscious choices
Right.
and minimizing their environmental footprint.
Hmm.
It's becoming a key factor in their purchasing decisions.
That makes me think about how hotels are communicating this shift to their guests.
Yeah.
Are they being transparent about their good enough approach, or are they trying to downplay it?
Right.
Because let's face it, good enough doesn't always have the most glamorous ring to it.
That's true. That's where the art of storytelling comes in.
Oh,
Hotels that are doing this well are reframing good enough as a positive choice,
okay.
highlighting the benefits rather than the perceived drawbacks.
Okay, I like that.
So, for example, instead of saying, we've reduced our housekeeping services to minimize our environmental impact, they might say, we offer a refreshed room experience upon request, allowing us to conserve resources
Oh, yeah.
and provide you with a more sustainable stay.
So it's all about emphasizing the value proposition for the guest.
Exactly.
It's not just about what they're not getting, but what they are gaining.
Precisely. And that might be a more personalized experience,
Right.
a lower price point,
Mm-hmm.
or the satisfaction of supporting a business that aligns with their values.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot where business goals and guest expectations intersect.
This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener for me. I'm going to be paying a lot more attention to how hotels and restaurants are implementing this good enough philosophy
Yeah.
in a way that, truly enhances the guest experience.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely be applying some of these insights to my own life as well.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. And remember, it's not about settling for mediocrity.
Right.
It's about making conscious, deliberate choices that align with our values and priorities, whether we're running a business or just navigating our daily lives.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance between striving for excellence and embracing the power of good enough.
That's a great takeaway. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope this conversation has inspired you to think differently about the pursuit of perfection and to embrace the possibilities of good enough.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.